How many believe those surveys that show the fear of public speaking is one of the greatest fears people have?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, my own research confirms that. I also write a lot of articles. I have them on my website. I post them on LinkedIn. And every time I look at the views, I have a steady number that watch and read them, but every once in a while they spike. Sometimes they really spike, and those are about the fear of public speaking, which is a good segue to this presentation. I'm going to talk about the fear of public speaking, why we have it. I'll give some nuggets to lessen it. I've got time set aside for questions, then we'll conclude the presentation. So, yeah, anybody feel like that sometimes? Yeah, okay. Well, why do we have this? Well, my short answer to that is, why not? You know, if you think about it, most of our conversations are one-on-one. A lot of those are on the phone. You don't see the person. And more people communicate by texting or email. You don't see or hear them. Well, it just stands to reason if you get up in front of a group of 30, 40 sets of eyeballs, like, whoa, we're out of our comfort zone, right? So it's natural. But there are three real reasons they have a fear of public speaking. Number one, if you don't know what you're talking about, don't get up here and talk about something that you don't have a lot of knowledge about. You should be scared if you do that. Number two, if you don't know the structure of a speech. And I talked about this once before. The structure of a speech is like the recipe for a great cake. There are specific ingredients that go in at specific times, in specific amounts. You do specific things to them, and you get a great presentation. And you can learn that. And the third thing is if you haven't practiced. Practicing is not optional. You know, bands that have been together for 30 years still rehearse. So practicing is not optional. Sometimes the fear of public speaking has to do with the audience. Now maybe it's a number of people. No problem talking to a table of 4, but 3 tables, 4, 5, 6, wow, that's a lot of tables. Sometimes it may have to do with asking for something. No trouble talking to a big group, but if I'm going to have to ask you to make a pledge, or if I'm going to have to ask you to write a check, that could be a fear. And sometimes it's particular people in the audience. I work with a financial guy. He talks to 200 retirees at a time, but if 3 of his cohorts are in the audience, he's a basket case. He feels like he's under a microscope. And then there are the what ifs. What if you guys don't like me? What if I'm not perfect? I have to be perfect up here, right? What if the speaker right before me, Ann, was really good, and she was, and you're comparing me to Ann, and I stink? But the biggest what if a lot of people have is, what if I've got nothing to talk about? What am I going to talk about that anyone would have any interest in? They've probably forgotten more than I know about the subject. They're probably going to go to sleep. They're going to want to leave right away. The fact is, and Bill taught this to me, each and every one of us has a knowledge base that's so wide and so deep that many times we don't know what we know. See, Dan, your everyday, that could be somebody's payday. Your everyday, John, could be everyone's aha moment. So each and every one of us has knowledge and value that people would benefit from and they would love to hear. Hand in glove with the fear of public speaking goes the fear of failure. But actually, failing is a great thing. Now you may be saying, I don't understand. But it is. Think about it. If you get something right the first time, you probably don't give it a second thought. Make sense? So we learn a lot by failing. In fact, failing gets a bad rap. One formula for success is fail early, fail often, and sometimes fail big. Anybody agree with that? Yeah. Hey, a lot of failures here, right? Right. Well, it just makes sense. It's a great way to learn if we fail. Now, some failing is really easy. If I'm going to do a tutorial by myself, I lock the door. It may take me 50 times to get through it. And someone else, it might take them twice, but nobody knows that but me. A puzzle is the same way. And I could never figure out Rubik's Cube. But I could sit there with a puzzle in my room and nobody knows if I get it or not. But some failure is tough, really tough. Public speaking, because public speaking is public, real public, and there's nowhere to hide. But my challenge to everyone is face that fear and do it anyway. Now take this into account. This is your comfort zone. If you're inside the comfort zone, you're comfortable, right? If we're outside of it, we're uncomfortable. And for most of us, public speaking, that takes us outside our comfort zone, right? This is where the learning begins, right at the edge of that comfort zone. So my challenge to everyone is get out of that comfort zone, and here's what happens. Make it larger. Let's talk about some nuggets to lessen that fear of public speaking. First of all, never get up here and say, I'm afraid of public speaking. I hate this. I didn't prepare. Well, you know, that kind of negative self-talk will become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Don't do that. People will start staring at you, and enough of them stare at you, you will get that shaking in the knees, right? This is huge. This is maybe one of my #1 suggestions. Meet and greet people. I think I met all the new guests, and I know most of the people here, but it is amazing how much easier it is to talk to someone where you've thanked them for coming and you've shaken their hands. This is huge. Now, the other thing about this, I always did this for myself, but this also gives them a stroke because most speakers don't do that. They step from behind the curtain. But if I introduce myself to someone and they're thinking, boy, that usually doesn't happen. I didn't even want to be here. Maybe I'll pay attention to this guy. They could be one of your heroes. Name tags, and we wear name tags here. I bring name tags with me when I speak because name tags reach out and they pull you in. They close that gap between people and they make that meet and greet so much easier. So insist on name tags when you're going to speak. Write your own introduction. You know, your introduction is not your bio. Nobody cares where you went to school, how many kids you have, and the fact that you collect stamps. It has nothing to do with your presentation. And usually, the Master of Ceremonies will take the bio off your site. It's the speaker's responsibility to write that introduction. And it answers 3 questions. Why this subject? Why this speaker? Why now? It should be like the king's trumpeters announcing the speaker, announcing the king. So the people should be excited to see that speaker come up. It's an integral part of your presentation. Know what you're talking about. There is a confidence in your competence that will lower your anxiety. Keep up on the latest and the greatest. Handling questions. Up front, tell people how you're going to handle questions. How many times have you been to a presentation and somebody says, oh my gosh, I've got 5 minutes left and 15 slides. Hold on, right? And what are you going to do if they ask you a question about your third to last slide? So in the opening, tell people how you're going to handle questions. I like to handle them before the close. It's a great way to handle questions because they can completely disrupt a presentation. Find a friendly face. Come on, somebody help me out here. Is there anyone else out there, Glenda? No, there's a lot of friendly faces. You find a friendly face and you'll gain energy from those people. Now, if you see this guy and he's out there, look somewhere else. You know, people bring all kinds of stuff to events like this that have nothing to do with the speaker. And who knows, they may be concentrating on your presentation, they just have an ugly face. Handouts, don't hand out handouts because they're a distraction. They distract the other people at the table. We can't multitask. If somebody's looking at something on the table, they're not concentrating on your presentation. Use props. This is a prop. You know, we have 3 learning styles. Visual, that's probably 65%. Auditory is 35%. And kinesthetic, doing, I've got a friend who, if he were here, he'd be writing everything down. If you can appeal to 2 or more of those learning styles, that increases the odds they get it. And having these props, this is great. These are my notes. It helps people learn. Have a spare tire. Things happen. Now, I'm a Mac guy, so I bring my thumb drive. I've got it backed up in Keynote. I've got it in PowerPoint. I've got it in a PDF. I've got pictures there of my whole presentation. That can relax your fear of public speaking. I've got a sheet like this with my whole presentation. I could give it if this projector goes out or the computer shoots craps. Use notes or a mind map. Same thing. Be audience-centered. You know, nobody came here today to see me speak. It's all about the audience. This is one of the laws of presentation. Because if you focus on the audience instead of yourself, what you'll find is that the quality of your presentation will go up and your anxiety will go down. And speaking of the audience, They're cheering for you, right? They want to see you succeed. I mean, is anybody sitting there thinking, I can't wait till Fred screws up, man, I'm going to be on stage. Okay, everybody is. Wrong question, next slide. I knew I shouldn't have asked. Okay, here's my silver nugget for lessening the fear of public speaking. Practice, practice, practice. You know? Steve Jobs, he's my presentation hero. If he had a 90-minute keynote presentation for an Apple product or service, he would practice for weeks. For weeks. You know, practice in the mirror, practice, do a video of yourself. I've seen people, I've coached people have an iPad and do it, then we'll evaluate it. Practice, practice, practice. And the golden nugget is this: speak. Speak, speak, speak. The learning is in the doing. Right? Okay, I guarantee the worst speech you'll ever give will be far better than the one you never give. Now, when I opened the presentation, I said I had time set aside for questions, and it's going quicker than I thought. What questions do you have for me? Well, I'm going to start the first question. One of the questions I'm always asked, and some of you have heard this before, is why would you take questions before you close? You know, usually the speaker finishes, the host comes up and says, can you stick around for questions? And you take the questions. Well, there's something called the law of primacy and recency. The audience best remembers the first and last things they see and hear. That's why you want to have a strong opening and a strong closing. And say I'm taking questions, and they're going along okay, and Will raises his hand. I've got time for one more question. Will says, you know, Fred, that thing you said about not having handouts, what a crock. Your whole presentation's a crock. What a waste of my time. Well, time's up. Everybody gets up to leave. That's the last thing you heard. So you want to have a strong closing. Now, there must be some questions. Scott?
This is just more a comment.
Well, I do it a little bit differently. You don't see any bullet points. You see mostly pictures. And again, we can't multitask. You know, bullet points don't reinforce a message. They complicate the message, they confuse the audience, and they conflict with the presenter. And quite frankly, it's a lot easier doing with images. Does that make sense? Yes. Well, one piece of paper at a time, turn it over, give me your attention. If people don't do it, stop talking. Because again, we can't multitask. You know, I prove it to myself all the time. I've got Steve Jobs' book on my iPad, and I'll be listening to the book and I'll think, let me check my email. Let me surf a little bit. Every time I go back to the book, I have to rewind. We can't do it. So when you give your opening, you lay down the ground rules. You know, same thing with the questions. You know, I said when I was going to handle the questions. Now, if somebody would have raised their hand, they would have said, do me a big favor. Write that down. If I don't cover that before we get to the Q&A, be sure to ask me. You know, a couple other rules about questions. Don't throw it out to the audience if you don't know it. I did that once, and a good friend, Robinson, Chris Robinson, some of you know Chris. Well, he gave me a great suggestion. He said, you threw it out to the audience. You don't know if they gave the right answer. That could have started a fight out there. You lost control. When you're up here, it's your responsibility to be in control. Make sense? Yes, Mark.
What's your take on presentations without visual aids such as a PowerPoint?
Naked? That's what they call it, naked. Well, you can do that. Paint word pictures. You know, a lot of times I'll start a presentation, picture this. Because we still picture in our mind's eye. But sometimes you can't do it this way. You don't have the projector, you don't have the pictures. But I think if you have the opportunity, why not take advantage of something that will enhance the value of your presentation? If 65% of us learn visually, this makes a lot of sense. Right? Other questions? Yes?
So you're saying you can't motor?
You know, that's a personal, if that's how they learn, if they're kinesthetic, but in most cases, you know, they don't look at the notes anyway. You'll learn more if you're listening. Some people do take notes. Thanks for mentioning that. Yeah. And I don't really have anything to email people. I'm emailing pictures. Sometimes people say, well, we want your presentation. What are you going to do with it? You know? Got time for one more question. Anybody? Okay, well, Glenda.
What about your opening? I've heard that it's really important to grab the audience attention immediately. Could you talk
It
about
is.
that a little bit?
Well, hopefully mine did that a little bit, and I said, who agrees? And I got people engaged by raising my hand. That's another thing. If you raise your hand, more people can get engaged with that. So in the opening, I said, do you agree with that? And that got people engaged. Let me mention something else about when you take questions, don't say, do you have any questions for me? Because somebody's sitting there thinking, I got a lot of questions, but nobody else is raising their hand. Maybe I missed something. I'm not going to embarrass myself. Better to say, what questions do you have for me? But take that a step further, what questions do you have for me? Right? All right, time for my closing. And let's review what we talked about. We talked about why the fear of public speaking, and we basically said, why not? It takes us out of our comfort zone. 75% of the population, to one degree or another, has this fear. So you're not alone. There's even a word for it. I think you've heard it, glossophobia. It comes from the Greek glosso, tongue, phobos, fear. But the important thing, it's a word. It's not a disease. And it can be controlled. You actually don't want to get rid of it completely. You want to take that nervous energy and put it in your presentation. You know, a presentation without energy is boring, right? Anyone ever sit through a boring presentation? Right. Not this one, I hope. All right. We talk about the nuggets to lessen the fear of public speaking, and the silver nugget is practice, practice, practice. The golden nugget is speak, speak, speak. The learning is in the doing. Well, let me close with a challenge and a prediction. And here's my challenge, and it's to each and every one of you. The next time someone offers you a speaking opportunity, let me change that. Find a speaking opportunity. Find it here at E4E, where you work, your trade association, Rotary Club, Chamber, wherever you can. Find that speaking opportunity, grab it, then prepare, practice, and deliver that presentation, and use some of these tips to lessen the fear of public speaking. Do that, and my prediction is this. Your next presentation, the next talk you give, your next speech will be absolutely, positively, there's no doubt in my mind, that presentation will be no sweat. Thank you.